Step into the art of Poirot, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot masters the craft of mystery. Imagine a grand English manor, its elegance hiding a deadly secret. A single cup of rare Brazilian coffee, poured with pride, becomes the instrument of murder. Who poisoned Sir Reginald Ashford in the locked library of Blackthorn Manor? Was it his enigmatic wife, clutching her sapphire pendant? The ambitious financier with a hidden affair? The nervous chemist with knowledge of deadly toxins? Or the loyal secretary who knows too much? In just 30 seconds, step into Agatha Christie's world of suspense, where Hercule Poirot's little gray cells unravel a web of lies, love, and betrayal. Each clue, a shattered cup, a used sugar bowl, a hidden vial, pulls you deeper into a mystery where everyone has a motive, but only one holds the truth. Will you guess the killer before Poirot reveals all? Dive into Hercule Poirot's Black Coffee Mystery, a chilling tale of deception that will keep you questioning until the final, shocking twist. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Manor. In the late autumn of 1928, Blackthorn Manor stood resolute against the encroaching mists of the Devonshire countryside. The estate, a sprawling Georgian edifice of ivy-clad stone, was nestled in a hollow where the air carried the faint tang of wood smoke and damp earth. Its windows glowed with the promise of warmth, but beneath the veneer of hospitality, a quiet unease simmered. Sir Reginald Ashford, a retired diplomat with a penchant for rare coffee blends, had invited a select group to his secluded home for what he described as a weekend of intellectual discourse. Yet, as Captain Arthur Hastings observed from the gravel drive, the gathering felt less like a symposium and more like a chessboard awaiting its first move. Hastings, ever the loyal companion to Hercule Poirot, had arrived at Sir Reginald's behest. The invitation, penned in the host's meticulous hand, had promised a rare treat, a tasting of a Brazilian coffee bean so exquisite it was said to rival the ambrosia of the gods. Hastings, whose tastes leaned more toward a reliable cup of English tea, had accepted primarily to escape the monotony of London's drizzle. Poirot, however, had declined, citing a prior engagement, though Hastings suspected his friend's reluctance stemmed from a distaste for Sir Reginald's ostentatious manner. The manor's oak-paneled hall was alive with the murmur of voices as Hastings entered. Sir Reginald, a wiry man in his late 50s with a neatly trimmed mustache and eyes that darted like a hawk's, greeted him with a vigor that seemed almost performative. "Captain Hastings, a pleasure to see a man of action among us bookish types," he boomed, clapping Hastings on the shoulder. His voice carried the polished cadence of a diplomat, but there was a brittleness to it, as though he were reciting lines rehearsed too often. The other guests were an eclectic assembly, each introduced with the Reginald's wife, a statuesque woman of 40, whose porcelain beauty was marred only by the faint lines of discontent around her mouth. She offered Hastings a cool smile, her fingers toying with a sapphire pendant that caught the firelight. Next came Dr. Lionel Crane, a chemist of some renown, whose round spectacles and nervous laugh suggested a man more comfortable with test tubes than social niceties. His wife, Mrs. Clara Crane, was a contrast in vivacity, a petite woman with auburn curls and a laugh that rang a touch too loud. Then there was Mr. Victor Langston, a financier with a reputation for ruthless ambition. His broad shoulders and square jaw gave him the air of a boxer, but his tailored suit and gold cufflinks spoke of wealth accumulated through less physical means. Beside him stood Miss Beatrice Lyle, a novelist whose Gothic tales had recently captured London's imagination. Her dark eyes scanned the room with a writer's curiosity, as though already crafting the next chapter of a lurid plot. Finally, there was Mr. Harold Gibbs, Sir Reginald's private secretary, a mousy man in his 30s whose deference bordered on obsequiousness. His hands fidgeted constantly, as though anxious to return to some unseen task. The evening began with drinks in the drawing room,
where a fire crackled in a hearth framed by marble cherubs. Sir Reginald held court, regaling the group with tales of his diplomatic postings in Brazil, where he had acquired his prized coffee beans. "The secret," he said, lifting a glass of brandy, "is in the roasting. Too light and it lacks depth, too dark and it turns bitter. Balance, my friends, is everything." His eyes lingered on Lady Evelyn as he spoke, and Hastings noted a flicker of discomfort in her expression. Dinner was served at 8, a sumptuous affair of roast pheasant and claret, though the conversation was strained. Langston and Dr. Crane debated the stock market with barely concealed barbs, while Miss Lyle probed Lady Evelyn about the manor's history, eliciting curt responses. Gibbs, seated at the table's end, ate in silence, his eyes darting to his employer with unsettling frequency. Hastings, seated beside Mrs. Crane, found her chatter about London's theatre scene a welcome distraction, though he couldn't shake the sense that the room was a powder keg awaiting a spark. As the clock struck 10, Sir Reginald rose, his face alight with anticipation. "And now, the pièce de résistance," he declared, gesturing to a silver tray where a coffee pot steamed, its aroma rich and intoxicating. "This is no ordinary brew. These beans were hand-picked from a single estate in Minas Gerais. One sip, and you'll understand why I guard them so jealously." He poured the coffee into delicate porcelain cups, each guest receiving their portion with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Hastings, wary of strong coffee so late, took a tentative sip that clung to the palate. The group adjourned to the library, where Sir Reginald's collection of rare manuscripts lined the walls. The conversation turned to literature, but the air grew heavy with unspoken tensions. Lady Evelyn excused herself early, claiming a headache, and Gibbs followed soon after, muttering about correspondence. The others lingered, their voices growing softer as the coffee's warmth took hold. Hastings, feeling the effects of the claret, decided to retire, bidding the group good night at 11:30. He had just reached the staircase when a piercing scream shattered the manor's quiet. It came from the library, sharp and unmistakable. Hastings turned, his heart pounding, and hurried back. The other guests were already converging, their faces pale in the lamplight. Lady Evelyn stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. On the library floor lay Sir Reginald Ashford, his body rigid, his face contorted in a rictus of pain. A shattered coffee cup lay beside him, its contents staining the Persian rug. Dr. Crane knelt, feeling for a pulse, but his grim expression confirmed what Hastings already suspected. Sir Reginald was dead. The room erupted in chaos. Mrs. Crane's sobs, Langston's barked demands for answers, Miss Lyle's whispered speculations. Hastings, his military instincts kicking in, noted the scene. The coffee pot still on the table, the other cups untouched, the window latched tight. No one had entered or left since he'd departed moments ago. The killer, he realized, was almost certainly among them. As the local constable was summoned, Hastings slipped away to the manor's telephone. He dialed a familiar number in London, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Poirot," he said when the line connected. "You must come at once. There's been a murder." The line crackled, and Hercule Poirot's voice, calm and precise, replied, "Mon ami, I shall be there by morning. Observe everything, Hastings, but disturb nothing. The little gray cells, they are already at work." Hastings hung up, his gaze returning to the library's grim tableau. The night was far from over, and Blackthorn Manor, once a haven of refinement, now harbored a secret as dark as the coffee that had preceded its master's death. Chapter 2. The Shadow of the Crime. The library at Blackthorn Manor, bathed in the cold light of dawn, seemed to hold its breath as the reality of Sir Reginald Ashford's death settled over the household. The room, once a sanctuary of leather-bound tomes and polished mahogany, now felt oppressive, its air thick with the acrid scent of spilled coffee and the faint, metallic tang of fear. Captain Hastings stood near the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back, observing the scene with a soldier's discipline. The body of Sir Reginald lay where it had fallen, untouched, as per the instructions of the local constable. Arrived in the small hours, and now stood guard at the door. The guests, summoned from their restless sleep, gathered in a loose semicircle, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and exhaustion. Lady Evelyn Ashford, her sapphire pendant glinting against her pale skin, sat rigidly in an armchair, her eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Lionel Crane, his spectacles fogged from nervous perspiration, clutched a handkerchief, while his wife, Clara, hovered close, her earlier vivacity replaced by a trembling unease. Victor Langston paced near the window, his broad frame casting long shadows across the rug, his jaw set in a scowl. Miss Beatrice Lyle, the novelist, stood apart, her notebook in hand, her dark eyes darting from face to face as though cataloging their reactions. Harold Gibbs, the secretary, lingered near the bookshelves, his hands twisting together, his face a mask of anxious deference. Sergeant Brooks, a man whose mustache seemed to compensate for his lack of imagination, cleared his throat. "Now, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his Devonshire accent thick, "we'll have order here." The doctors confirmed Sir Reginald was poisoned. Likely something in that coffee, given the timing. "I'll need statements from each of you, where you were, what you saw, and when you last spoke to the deceased." Hastings suppressed a sigh. Brooks was competent enough for village thefts, but a murder of this complexity required a sharper mind. He glanced at his watch. 6:45 a.m. Poirot had promised to arrive by morning, and Hastings could only hope his friend's train was punctual. For now he resolved to observe, as Poirot had instructed, noting every detail of the scene and its players. The library clock, a heavy ormolu affair, ticked loudly in the silence. Hastings's eyes traced the room. The coffee pot, still half full, sat on a silver tray beside 6 cups, 5 untouched. Sir Reginald's cup, shattered on the floor, had left a dark stain on the rug, its shards glinting like broken promises. The window, latched from within, ruled out an intruder. The door, heavy oak with a single key, had been locked briefly after dinner, Gibbs had said, to protect Sir Reginald's manuscripts. Hastings noted the key now rested on the table, its brass surface gleaming under the chandelier's light. Brooks began his questioning with Lady Evelyn, who spoke in a low, controlled voice. "I retired at 10, as I said. A headache. I saw nothing, heard nothing until the scream." Her fingers tightened around her pendant, and Hastings wondered if the gesture was a nervous habit or something more deliberate. Dr. Crane was next, his voice faltering. I was here, in the library, discussing chemistry with Sir Reginald. He was fascinated." Langston's account was brusque. "I was in the billiard room alone, practicing shots. Left the library at 10:15, didn't see Ashford after that." His eyes met Hastings's, challenging, as though daring contradiction. Miss Lyle's statement was measured, almost theatrical. "I remained in the library until 10:40, writing notes for my novel. Sir Reginald was alive when I left, speaking with Mr. Gibbs about some letter." Her gaze flickered to the secretary, who flinched. Gibbs, when pressed, stammered, I was with Sir Reginald until 10:45. He asked me to draft a cable to Brazil. I went to the study to type it. When I returned, I heard Lady Evelyn scream." His eyes darted to the coffee pot, and Hastings noted a bead of sweat on his brow. The interviews concluded, Brooks scribbled notes, muttering about sending for a toxicologist. Hastings, however, felt a growing unease. The alibis were too neat, the timelines too precise. Someone was lying. but the truth lay buried in details yet to be unearthed. At precisely 8 a.m., the crunch of gravel announced the arrival of a motor car. Hercule Poirot stepped into the library, his small frame immaculate in a tailored overcoat, his mustache waxed to perfection. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, swept the room, taking in every face, every object, every shadow. "Mon ami," he greeted Hastings, his voice a soothing balm. "You have kept the scene intact, oui? Bon. Now, let us begin." Poirot's presence seemed to shift the room's atmosphere, as though a conductor had raised his baton. He approached Sir Reginald's body, kneeling with a grace that belied his age. "Poison, you say?" he murmured, studying the contorted features. "The face, it tells a story. Convulsions, perhaps strychnine or cyanide. But we shall see." He rose, dusting his knees, and turned to the coffee pot. "This, mes amis, is the heart of the matter. Who poured the coffee? Who touched the cups?" Brooks, flustered, began to protest, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non, non, Sergeant. You have done well to secure the scene. But now you permit Hercule Poirot to exercise his little grey cells." He circled the table, examining the cups, the tray, the pot. 5 cups untouched, 1 broken. Interesting. And the pot, still warm when the body was found, oui? Hastings nodded, recalling the steam he'd seen at midnight. Poirot's gaze settled on the guests, each of whom seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "You are all here," he said, his voice deceptively
A specific poison. To Langston, the billiard room. It is far from the library. Yet you heard no scream. Each question was a probe, testing for cracks in their composure. Hastings watched, marveling at Poirot's method. The detective's eyes missed nothing. The tremor in Gibbs's hands, the way Miss Lyle's pen paused mid-sentence, the faint flush on Clara Crane's cheeks. By the time Poirot concluded, the room was taut with tension, as though a storm were brewing. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he said softly, "this is no simple murder. The coffee, it is the key, but not the whole story. There is a motive here, deep and personal. We must look to the hearts of these people, their secrets, their desires. And we must be quick, for I fear the killer is not yet done." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. The library, with its silent witnesses, the books, the coffee pot, the shattered cup, held the truth. But it would take Poirot's genius to unravel it. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun, struggling through the heavy clouds over Blackthorn Manor, cast a feeble light across the library, where Sir Reginald Ashford's body still lay, now covered with a white sheet at Sergeant Brooks's insistence. The room, once a haven of intellectual pursuit, had transformed into a stage for tragedy, its air thick with the lingering scent of coffee and suspicion. Captain Hastings stood near the window, his breath fogging the cold glass as he watched Hercule Poirot pace the room with the precision of a metronome. The detective's small, immaculate figure seemed to command the space, his green eyes darting from the coffee pot to the shattered cup, from the latched window to the heavy oak door. Hastings knew that look. Poirot's little gray cells were already weaving a tapestry from the threads of evidence. The other guests had been shepherded to the drawing-room by Sergeant Brooks, who was attempting to maintain order with the dogged persistence of a man out of his depth.
Their voices, muffled through the walls, carried the strain of whispered arguments and stifled sobs. Hastings had caught fragments as he passed: Clara Crane's plaintive questions, Victor Langston's gruff dismissal of the police, and Miss Beatrice Lyle's murmured observation that the scene would make a splendid novel. Only Lady Evelyn and Harold Gibbs had remained silent, their faces pale masks of restraint. Poirot, having completed his initial inspection, turned to Hastings with a faint smile. "Mon ami, you have observed well, but you see only the surface. The truth, it lies in the details, the small things that seem unimportant."
Return to the library. Lady Evelyn in the doorway, doctor. Crane kneeling by the body. Langston and Miss Lyle near the table. Clara Crane clutching her husband's arm. Gibbs hovering at the edge. "It was chaos, Poirot," he concluded, "but the window was latched, the door unlocked. The killer had to be one of them." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "Oui, Hastings. But it is not enough to say one of them. We must know who and why. The coffee, it is central, but it is not the whole story. Come, let us join the others. I wish to see their faces when they speak." In the drawing room, the guests sat in uneasy silence, their eyes flickering to Poirot as he entered. Sergeant Brooks, stationed by the fireplace, looked relieved at the detective's arrival. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "I've taken statements, but I'll need your expertise. The coroner's on his way, and the toxicologist from Exeter. They'll confirm the poison." "Bon," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished wood. "But the poison, it is only the method, the motive, the opportunity. These are what we seek. Let us begin with a simple question." He turned to the group, his gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. "Who poured the coffee last night?" A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Evelyn spoke first, her voice steady but cold. "My husband poured it himself. He was particular about his coffee, insisted on doing it personally to ensure the proportions were correct." Her fingers brushed her sapphire pendant, a gesture Hastings noted again. Dr. Crane cleared his throat. "That's right. Sir Reginald filled each cup from the pot. I saw him do it. No one else touched it." His spectacles slipped down his nose, and he pushed them back with a trembling hand. "Interesting," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, only Sir Reginald's cup brought death. Tell me, Dr. Crane, you spoke of alkaloids with him. Did he mention any specific substances? Perhaps something he kept in this house?" Crane flushed, his handkerchief twisting in his hands. No, nothing specific. Just a general interest in my work on plant-based toxins. He was curious, that's all." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Curiosity? It can be dangerous, no?" He turned to Victor Langston, who stood with his arms crossed, his expression defiant. "Monsieur Langston, you were in the billiard room, alone, from 10:15 until the scream. A long time to practice shots, oui?" Langston's jaw tightened. "I like my own company, and I don't see what billiards has to do with murder." "Everything has to do with murder, monsieur," Poirot replied softly. "Every moment."
But I wasn't watching the pot. I was focused on my work. Sir Reginald was alive when I left, speaking with Mr. Gibbs. Her eyes flicked to the secretary, who shrank under the attention. Gibbs stammered, I only spoke to him briefly, about a cable to Brazil. I left at 10:45 as I told the sergeant. The coffee was already poured." Poirot's gaze lingered on Gibbs, then moved to Clara Crane, who sat clutching her husband's arm. "Madame Crane, you left the library early, oui? Did you notice anything unusual before you departed?" Clara's laugh was nervous, almost shrill. "No, nothing. I was tired, that's all. I went to my room at 10:20 and Lionel joined me soon after." Her eyes darted to her husband, seeking confirmation. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well. We have a timeline, but timelines, they can deceive. Let us examine the scene once more." He led the group back to the library, where the sheet-covered body lay like a silent accusation. Poirot knelt by the shattered cup, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the shards. The cup, it broke when he fell, oui? But why only his? The others remain intact. Hastings watched as Poirot lifted the coffee pot, sniffing its contents delicately. The aroma, it is strong but not unusual. Yet something was added, I think, after the pouring. Something subtle, to escape notice. He set the pot down and turned to the window, testing the latch. Secure, as you said, Hastings. No one entered from outside. Sergeant Brooks coughed. "We'll have the pot analyzed, Mr. Poirot. If it's poison, we'll find it." "Bien sûr," Poirot said, but his tone suggested he needed no laboratory to confirm his suspicions. He moved to the table, where the 5 untouched cups stood in a neat row. These cups, they were filled but not drunk. Why? Did no one trust the coffee, or was it merely a matter of taste? Lady Evelyn's voice was sharp. "I don't care for coffee so late. It keeps me awake." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, "and yet your husband drank, alone." His eyes met hers, and she looked away, her fingers tightening on her pendant. As the morning wore on, Poirot continued his observations, noting the position of every object, the angle of the light, the wear on the rug. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's methods, knew these details were not trivial. Poirot was building a picture, piece by piece, and the truth would emerge from the contradictions. By noon, the coroner arrived, and Sir Reginald's body was removed for autopsy. Poirot, undeterred, requested a map of the manor, which Gibbs provided with trembling hands. "We shall reconstruct the evening," Poirot declared. "Every step, every moment."
But how was it done? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, Hastings. The coffee is the weapon, but the hand that wielded it is clever. We must look to the motives: love, greed, revenge. One of these people has a secret they cannot hide forever." The manor seemed to close in around them, its walls whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. Hastings felt a chill, not from the autumn air, but from the certainty that the killer was still among them, watching, waiting. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The afternoon at Blackthorn Manor carried a heaviness that seemed to seep into the very walls, as though the house itself mourned Sir Reginald Ashford's untimely end. The library, now cleared of the body but not of its grim aura, remained the focal point of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The detective stood at the centre of the room, his small frame a beacon of calm amid the storm of suspicion that swirled around the guests. Captain Hastings, stationed near the door, watched as Poirot's sharp eyes roamed the space, lingering on the silver coffee tray, the 5 untouched cups, and the stain where Sir Reginald's shattered cup had spilled its deadly contents. Sergeant Brooks had retreated to the manor's study to telephone the Exeter toxicologist, leaving Poirot to conduct his interviews with a precision that Hastings knew would unsettle the already nervous household. The guests had been summoned one by one to the drawing room, a grand space with velvet curtains and a chandelier that cast flickering shadows across the portraits of Ashford ancestors. Poirot had chosen this room deliberately, Hastings suspected, for its formality, which seemed to amplify the weight of his questions. Poirot began with Lady Evelyn Ashford, who entered with the grace of a woman accustomed to scrutiny, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. She wore a black dress, a nod to mourning, but her sapphire pendant gleamed defiantly against the sombre fabric.
Poirot gestured to a chair, his manner courteous but firm. "Madame," he said, his voice soft yet penetrating, "you have said you retired at 10 with a headache. Yet you were the first to scream to discover your husband's body. Tell me, what drew you back to the library at 11:30? Lady Evelyn's fingers brushed her pendant, a gesture Hastings now recognized as a nervous tic. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her voice measured. "The headache eased, and I thought to fetch a book. When I entered the library, I saw him, lying there." Her voice caught, but her eyes remained dry. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "And the coffee, madame? You did not drink it, though your husband poured you a cup. Why?" "I told you, I don't care for coffee so late."
Hesitated, her gaze flickering to the window. He was particular about it. He didn't like to share it with those who wouldn't appreciate it. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. For now, that is all." As she rose, Hastings noted the tension in her shoulders, as though she carried an invisible burden. Next came Dr. Lionel Crane, his spectacles fogged again, his hands clutching a worn leather notebook. Poirot's questions were swift, precise. "Doctor, you spoke of alkaloids with Sir Reginald. You are a chemist, oui? Tell me, what poisons might produce such a death? Convulsions? A contorted face?" Crane swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Well, strychnine could do it. Or cyanide, perhaps. Both are fast-acting, though cyanide is more odoriferous. I'd need to see the autopsy report to be certain." "And Sir Reginald," Poirot pressed, "did he keep such substances in the house? For his experiments, perhaps?" Crane's eyes widened. "No, no. He was a collector, not a scientist. He had no laboratory, only his coffee and his books." His voice rose, and Hastings noted Clara Crane waiting outside, glanced nervously through the door. Poirot shifted tack. "You left the library at 10:30, you say, to fetch a book. Which book, doctor?" Crane blinked, fumbling with his notebook. A treatise on toxicology. I thought it might interest Sir Reginald." "Indeed," Poirot said, his mustache twitching. "And you returned when?" "When I heard the scream. I was in my room reading." Poirot dismissed him with a nod, and Clara Crane entered next, her auburn curls disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. "Madame," Poirot began gently, "you left the library early at 10:20. Did you see anyone near the coffee pot before you departed?" Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, I was tired. I just wanted to rest. Lionel joined me soon after, and we stayed in our room until the scream." Poirot's gaze softened, but his question was pointed. "And your husband? He is often nervous, no? His hands, they shake. Is this usual? Or is it the shadow of this crime?" Clara bristled. "He's sensitive, that's all. This horror would upset anyone." She clutched her shawl, her knuckles white. Victor Langston followed, his broad frame filling the doorway. His answers were curt, his tone impatient. "I told you I was in the billiard room. Didn't see the coffee poured, didn't touch it. I heard the scream and came running. That's all." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur, you are a man of business. Sir Reginald, he was your associate, oui? Were there disagreements between you?" Langston's jaw tightened. "We had our differences. He was cautious, I'm not. But murder? That's absurd." His gaze met, still in hand.
"Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "you observe closely, as a novelist must. Tell me, what did you see in the library before you left at 10:40? Beatrice's lips curved slightly, as though amused by the question. Sir Reginald was animated, talking about his coffee. Mr. Gibbs was hovering, as usual. The others were distracted. I didn't see anyone touch the pot after the coffee was poured. And your notes, Poirot said, gesturing to her notebook. They are about the evening, May I see them? Her smile faltered. They're just ideas for my novel. Nothing relevant. She clutched the notebook tighter, and Poirot let the matter drop, though his eyes lingered on her. Harold Gibbs was the last, his mousy demeanor more pronounced under Poirot's scrutiny. Monsieur Gibbs, Poirot said, you were with Sir Reginald until 10:45. What was this cable to Brazil? Gibbs's hands twisted together. It was about his coffee supplier. He wanted to order more beans. I went to the study to type it, then returned when I heard Lady Evelyn. Poirot leaned forward. And the coffee pot? It was untouched when you left? Yes, sir. I swear it. Gibbs's voice was almost a whisper. As Gibbs left, Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, they all speak, but they do not say everything. There is a rhythm to their lies, a pattern. The coffee, it is the key, but the motive, it is hidden in their hearts. Hastings frowned. But Poirot, if Sir Reginald poured the coffee himself, how could it be poisoned? And why only his cup? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, Hastings, is the question. The poison was not in the pot, I think, but in the cup. A clever hand. A moment's distraction. We must find the moment and the hand. The interviews concluded. Poirot requested a detailed map of the manor's ground floor, which Gibbs provided, along with a timetable of the evening's events. Poirot studied it, his finger tracing the paths from the library to the billiard room, the study, the bedrooms. The movements, they must align, he murmured. But there is a gap, a discrepancy. We shall find it. As the afternoon faded, the manor grew quieter, the guests retreating to their rooms under Brooks's orders. Hastings followed Poirot back to the library, where the detective stood before the coffee tray, his eyes distant. This is no random act, Hastings, he said softly. This is personal. A hatred, a betrayal, and we shall uncover it, step by step. The weight of the manor pressed down. Body retained a chilling presence, as if the very air held memories of the crime. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the silver coffee tray with its 5 untouched cups and the stain where the 6th had shattered. Captain Hastings, ever attentive, stood nearby, his notebook open, jotting down details as Poirot murmured observations. The detective's methodical calm was a stark contrast to the growing agitation among the guests, who had been confined to the manor under Sergeant Brooks's orders. The local police, bolstered by the arrival of Inspector Grayson from Exeter, had taken a predictable turn in their investigation. Grayson, a burly man with a penchant for straightforward solutions, had zeroed in on Harold Gibbs, the mousy secretary, as the prime suspect. He was the last to see Sir Reginald alive, Grayson declared in the drawing room, where the guests had gathered for tea. And that business about a cable to Brazil, it's flimsy. No record of it in the study, and Gibbs was alone with the coffee pot for a good 5 minutes. Gibbs, seated in a corner, paled, his hands trembling as he clutched a teacup. I didn't touch the coffee, he stammered. I only did as Sir Reginald asked. The cable was to be sent this morning. Poirot, who had been listening silently, raised a hand. Monsieur l'Inspecteur, he said, his voice smooth but firm. You are quick to conclude, but Hercule Poirot, he does not leap. Let us consider the facts, not the convenience. His gaze swept the room, noting the reactions. Lady Evelyn's tightened lips, Dr. Crane's nervous glance at his wife, Victor Langston's scowl, and Miss Beatrice Lyle's faint,
knowing smile. Grayson bristled, but nodded. "Very well, Mr. Poirot. What do you make of it?" Poirot stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "The coffee. It is the heart of this mystery, oui? But the poison, it was not in the pot, or all would have suffered. It was in Sir Reginald's cup, introduced after the pouring. Monsieur Gibbs, he is a convenient suspect. But convenience, it is the enemy of truth. Let us examine the others." The room tensed as Poirot began to pace, his voice taking on the cadence of a lecturer. "Monsieur Langston, you were in the billiard room, alone, from 10:15 until the scream at 11:30. A man of your strength could easily slip back to the library unnoticed. And you, Dr. Crane, your knowledge of poisons is most intriguing. Madame Crane, your early departure, perhaps to avoid the coffee altogether? Mademoiselle Lyle, your notes, they capture every detail, yet you claim to have seen nothing. And Madame Ashford, your headache, it spared you the coffee, but not the discovery of your husband's body." The accusations hung in the air, each guest shifting uncomfortably. Hastings watched, marveling at...
Detective continued. "The poison. It was swift. Cyanide, perhaps. Or strychnine, as Dr. Crane suggested. But how was it delivered? A sleight of hand, a moment's distraction. We must look to the moments before the coffee was drunk." Inspector Grayson, eager to reassert control, pointed at Gibbs. He had the opportunity. He admits he was with Sir Reginald until 10:45. Plenty of time to slip something into the cup. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Opportunity, oui. But motive? Monsieur Gibbs, he is a secretary, dependent on Sir Reginald's favor. To kill him risks everything. No, the motive lies elsewhere, perhaps in money, perhaps in love, perhaps in revenge." Lady Evelyn rose, her voice icy. "This is absurd. You're accusing us all, Mr. Poirot, when poor Harold is clearly the target. He was always skulking about, jealous of Reginald's success." Gibbs flushed, his voice rising. "That's not true. I was loyal to Sir Reginald. He trusted me with everything, his papers, his accounts." "Enough!" Poirot's voice cut through the tension. "We do not accuse without evidence. Let us return to the library. There is something I must see." The group followed, reluctant but curious, as Poirot led them back to the scene of the crime. The library was as they had left it, the coffee tray untouched under Brooks's watch. Poirot knelt by the stain on the rug, his gloved fingers hovering over the shards of the broken cup. "This cup," he said, "it tells a story. It broke when Sir Reginald fell, oui, but why was it the only one? The others, they stand untouched. Did no one else drink because they suspected, or because they knew?" Hastings frowned. "But Poirot, if they suspected poison, why not warn Sir Reginald?" "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot replied. "That is the question. Perhaps they did not suspect until too late, or perhaps one among them knew, and chose silence." Poirot turned to the coffee pot, lifting its lid and peering inside. "The aroma. It is unchanged, but we await the toxicologist's report. For now, let us consider the timeline." He produced the map Gibbs had provided, spreading it on the table. "The library, here. The billiard room, there. The study, upstairs. The bedrooms, along this corridor. Each of you claims a place. But the manor, it is not so large. A quick step, a quiet movement, anyone could have returned to the library." Miss Lyle's voice was cool. "You're suggesting one of us slipped back to poison the coffee. But how? Sir Reginald poured it himself." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "How?" She stiffened. "I observe people.
"It's my craft, and a fine craft it is," Poirot said, returning the notebook. "But truth, it can be dangerous." As the guests dispersed, Inspector Grayson pulled Poirot aside. "You're muddying the waters, Mr. Poirot. Gibbs is our man, mark my words." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, the waters, they are already muddy. Gibbs, he is a red herring, a distraction. The true killer is cleverer, hiding behind the obvious." Alone with Hastings, Poirot lowered his voice. "Mon ami, the inspector, he sees only the surface, but we see the undercurrents. The poison was not in the pot, but in the cup, introduced in a moment of cunning. We must find that moment, and the hand that seized it." Hastings nodded, his mind racing. "But Poirot, the alibis, they're so tight. Everyone claims to have been elsewhere. We, Hastings, and that is the flaw. Alibis so perfect, they are imperfect. Someone has rehearsed their story too well. We shall test them, push them, until the cracks appear." The manor grew quieter as evening approached, the guests retreating to their rooms under Grayson's watchful eye. Hastings followed Poirot to the study, where the detective examined Sir Reginald's desk, its papers neatly arranged despite Gibbs's claim of drafting a cable. "No cable," Poirot murmured. "Another lie, perhaps. Or a distraction." As they left the study, Hastings caught a glimpse of Lady Evelyn in the hall, her sapphire pendant catching the light. She met his gaze, then turned away, her expression unreadable. The manor's secrets were tightening like a noose, and Hastings knew that Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth would soon expose the killer, hiding among them. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The twilight cast a somber glow over Blackthorn Manor, its windows reflecting the fading light like eyes watching the unfolding drama within. The library, now a shrine to Sir Reginald Ashford's untimely death, seemed to pulse with secrets, its shelves of ancient books bearing silent witness to the crime. Hercule Poirot stood beside the silver coffee tray, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the pot as if it might whisper its story. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful observer, stood nearby, his notebook filled with jotted details, though he felt increasingly lost in the labyrinth of clues and contradictions. The air was thick with the weight of suspicion, and the guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Grayson's orders, moved like shadows through the halls, their faces etched with unease. Poirot's investigation had taken a meticulous turn, his focus sharpening on the smallest details of the fateful evening. The toxicologist's preliminary report, delivered by a harried messenger,
No trace of the substance, narrowing the method to the shattered cup itself. This revelation had sent Inspector Grayson into a flurry of accusations, his suspicions still fixed on Harold Gibbs, whose nervous demeanor and proximity to the victim made him an easy target. Poirot, however, remained unconvinced, his little grey cells seeking a subtler truth. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low as they stood in the library, "the cyanide. It was not in the pot, but in the cup. This is no accident, no careless mistake. It is a deliberate act, executed with precision. We must find the moment when the poison was introduced." Hastings frowned, glancing at the 5 untouched cups on the tray. "But Poirot, Sir Reginald poured the coffee himself. Everyone agrees on that. How could anyone tamper with his cup without being seen?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, Hastings, is where the detail lies. A gesture, a distraction, a moment when all eyes were elsewhere. Let us reconstruct the scene." He moved to the table, positioning himself where Sir Reginald had stood.
He pours the coffee, oui? 6 cups, 1 for each guest. Yet only he drinks. Why? Because the others do not trust the coffee. Or because they know something he does not. Hastings nodded, recalling the evening. Lady Evelyn said she doesn't drink coffee late. Dr. Crane and his wife left early. Langston was in the billiard room, Miss Lyle was writing, and Gibbs was with Sir Reginald until 10:45. Précisément, Poirot said, his moustache twitching. But there is a gap, a moment unaccounted for. Let us examine the objects. He bent over the tray, his gaze settling on the sugar bowl, a delicate silver piece with a tiny spoon. This sugar, it was offered with the coffee, no? Did Sir Reginald take sugar? Hastings hesitated. I don't recall. I didn't take any myself. Bitter coffee's not my taste. Poirot's smile was faint but triumphant. A detail, Hastings, and a vital one. I spoke with the housekeeper this morning. She confirms Sir Reginald took his coffee black, always. Yet, the sugar bowl, it is not full. Some has been used. By whom? Hastings's eyes widened. You think the poison was in the sugar? Perhaps, Poirot said, lifting the spoon and examining it under the chandelier's light. Or perhaps the sugar is a distraction, a red herring to mislead us. But it is a clue, and we shall follow it.
He knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, and examined the shards. Aha! Regardez, Hastings. A faint residue. Not coffee, but something crystalline. Cyanide, perhaps. Not fully dissolved. Hastings leaned in, his heart quickening. So the poison was in the cup before the coffee was poured? Or added during a moment of chaos, Poirot said, rising. Let us speak with the housekeeper again. She may know more about this sugar. Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, was a stout woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense air. She met them in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour from preparing the evening meal. Sugar, Mr. Poirot, she said, frowning. Sir Reginald never touched it. Kept the bowl for guests, but it's rarely used. I filled it fresh yesterday morning. And who had access to it? Poirot asked, his tone gentle, but probing. Anyone, I suppose, she replied. It was on the tray all day, in the dining room before dinner, then moved to the library. I didn't notice anyone near it, but I was busy with the meal. Poirot thanked her and returned to the library, his mind clearly racing. The sugar bowl, Hastings, he said. It is a possibility, but not the only one. We must consider the movements of each guest after the coffee was poured. A distraction, a spilled drink, a dropped book could provide the moment. Hastings flipped through his notes. Miss Lyle was writing, but she was watching everyone. Langston was in the billiard room, but it's only a short walk back. Dr. Crane and his wife were upstairs, or so they claim. Lady Evelyn was in her room, and Gibbs was in the study. Poirot nodded. And yet, someone returned to this room unseen. Or perhaps they never left. He paused, his gaze settling on the bookshelf near the table. Regardez, Hastings, this shelf. It is slightly askew. A book is missing. Hastings followed his gaze, noting the gap in the row of leather-bound volumes. You think someone took a book? But why? To create a diversion, perhaps, Poirot said. Or to hide something. Let us search. They combed the shelves, finding nothing at first, until Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint behind a row of books. He reached in, retrieving a small glass vial. Empty, but with a faint chemical odor. Mon Dieu, he whispered. This is no coincidence. Cyanide, I am certain. Hastings's pulse quickened. But who hid it? And when? "That, mon ami, is what we shall discover," Poirot said, pocketing the vial. "We must confront the guests again, but carefully. The killer, they are watching us, and they are clever." The evening meal was a tense affair. The guests seated around the dining table under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye. Poirot, declining food, stood.
Invite you to speak now, before the truth is forced into the light. The room erupted in denials. Langston's gruff protest, Clara Crane's gasp, Gibbs's stammered insistence of innocence. Lady Evelyn's hand froze on her pendant, and Miss Lyle's pen paused mid-stroke. Dr. Crane, however, went pale, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "A vial," he whispered. I know nothing of it." Poirot's smile was cold. "We shall see, Doctor. The truth, it is like the coffee, bitter, but it cannot be hidden forever." As the guests dispersed, Hastings pulled Poirot aside. "That vial, Poirot, it's a breakthrough, isn't it? But how do we know who hid it?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Patience, Hastings. The vial is a clue, but it is also a trap. The killer, they will react, and in their reaction, we shall find them. For now, we watch, we listen, and we wait." The manor's halls grew darker as night fell, the weight of the clue pressing on Hastings's mind. The killer was among them, their secret exposed by a single, crystalline detail. Poirot's net was tightening, but the truth remained just out of reach. Surface. The night settled over Blackthorn Manor like a heavy velvet curtain, its silence broken only by the occasional creak of the old house and the distant howl of wind across the Devonshire moors. The library, now stripped of its grim centerpiece, but still marked by the coffee stain on the rug, seemed to pulse with the tension of secrets yet to be unveiled. Hercule Poirot, his small frame silhouetted against the firelight, stood before the silver coffee tray, his eyes fixed on the 5 untouched cups as if they might speak. Captain Hastings, standing near the bookshelf where the cyanide vial had been found, felt the weight of the investigation pressing down, each clue a thread in a tapestry that Poirot was weaving with relentless precision. The discovery of the vial had sent ripples through the household, and the guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Grayson's orders, were growing restless. The dining room, where they had gathered for a strained supper, had been a battleground of glances and silences, each person guarding their own secrets while casting suspicion on the others. Poirot's announcement of the vial had elicited denials, but Hastings had noted the subtle shifts. Lady Evelyn's hand tightening on her sapphire pendant, Dr. Crane's spectacles slipping further down his nose, Victor Langston's clenched fists, Miss Beatrice Lyle's pen pausing mid-stroke, and Harold Gibbs's near panic as he protested his innocence. Poirot, ever the master of timing, had chosen not to press further at dinner, instead retreating to the library with Hastings to review the evidence. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low and measured. "The vial, it is a significant—" We must dig deeper into the hearts of these people. Their lies, they are beginning to crack. Hastings flipped through his notebook, his brow furrowed. "But Poirot, the alibis are so tight. Everyone claims to have been elsewhere when the coffee was poured. And the vial, how did it get behind the bookshelf?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "The alibis, they are too perfect, Hastings. A perfect alibi is a lie, dressed in fine clothes. As for the vial, it was placed there deliberately, perhaps to be retrieved later, or perhaps to be found. The killer, they are clever, but not infallible." He turned to the map of the manor, spread across the table, his finger tracing the path from the library to the study. "The movements, they do not align perfectly. There is a gap, a moment unaccounted for. We must find it." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, entered, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, sir, I thought you should know. There's been a row in the drawing room. Mr. Langston and Dr. Crane,
They're at each other's throats. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, Madame Hargreaves. This is most interesting. Come, Hastings, let us observe. In the drawing room, the scene was one of barely contained chaos. Victor Langston stood by the fireplace, his face flushed with anger, pointing a thick finger at Dr. Crane, who clutched his notebook like a shield. "You're a chemist, Crane," Langston bellowed. "You know poisons better than anyone here. Don't pretend you didn't have a hand in this." Crane's voice was shrill, his spectacles fogged. "That's preposterous. I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. You, on the other hand, everyone knows you argued with him over that investment deal." Clara Crane, standing beside her husband, gasped, her hands fluttering. "How dare you, Mr. Langston? Lionel wouldn't hurt a fly." Lady Evelyn, seated in an armchair, watched with a cold detachment, her fingers brushing her pendant. Miss Lyle, perched on a sofa, scribbled furiously in her notebook, her eyes darting between the combatants. Harold Gibbs hovered near the door, his face a mask of anxiety, as if he feared being drawn into the fray. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the din. "Mes amis, enough. Accusations without evidence, they are like coffee without beans, bitter and empty. Let us speak calmly." He turned to Langston, his gaze piercing. "Monsieur, you speak of an investment deal. Tell me more." Langston hesitated, his bluster fading. "It was business. Sir Reginald backed out of a venture I proposed, a coffee export deal in Brazil. He said it was too risky, but I think he just didn't trust me." "And this made you angry?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Of course it did," Langston snapped, "but I didn't—
Reginald. Was there perhaps a professional rivalry, or a debt unpaid? Crane flushed, his hands trembling. No rivalry, no debt. We discussed science, nothing more. I respected him, Clara interjected, her voice trembling. Lionel's telling the truth. He's been nothing but kind to Sir Reginald. It's that secretary Gibbs who's always sneaking about. Gibbs gasped, his voice rising. I was loyal. I never touched the coffee. You all saw me leave for the study. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching a flicker of something in Gibbs's tone. Monsieur Gibbs, you say you went to the study to draft a cable, yet no draft was found. Tell me, what was the content of this cable? Gibbs's hands twisted together, his eyes darting to Lady Evelyn, who looked away. It was about ordering more beans. Sir Reginald was particular about his supplier. I must have misplaced the draft. Poirot's smile was faint but chilling. Misplaced or never written? We shall see. He turned to Miss Lyle, who had been watching the exchange with a writer's keen interest. Mademoiselle, your notebook. It records the evening's events, oui? Perhaps you noted something about this cable, or the sugar bowl. Beatrice's lips curved slightly. I noted only what I saw. Sir Reginald pouring the coffee, Gibbs hovering, the others leaving one by one. The sugar bowl? I didn't see anyone touch it. Poirot nodded, but his gaze lingered on her notebook. Your observations, they are valuable. But I wonder, do you write only what you see, or what you wish to see? The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them. Hastings, watching from the sidelines, felt a chill. Poirot was peeling back layers, exposing lies not through confrontation, but through subtle pressure, revealing the fissures in their stories. As the guests dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, the lies, they multiply. Langston's anger, Crane's nervousness, Gibbs's missing cable, these are not accidents. And Lady Evelyn, her silence, it speaks louder than words.
We must look to the relationships, the affairs, the feuds, the hidden desires. Hastings frowned. You think it's personal, then? Not business or money? Poirot's eyes twinkled. It is always personal, Hastings. The heart. It is the true battlefield. Tomorrow, we shall press harder. The killer, they feel the net tightening, and they will make a mistake. The manor grew quiet as the guests retired, but Hastings couldn't shake the sense that the night held
The lamplight. The manor's secrets were unraveling, thread by thread, but the truth remained just beyond reach, hidden in the lies that surfaced like ripples on a dark pond. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The morning at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a heavy mist that clung to the windows, shrouding the estate in a veil of secrecy that mirrored the tangled web of lies within. The library, though no longer a crime scene, remained the heart of the mystery, its air thick with the ghosts of the previous night's revelations. Hercule Poirot stood by the silver coffee tray, his immaculate figure a stark contrast to the disarray of emotions among the guests. Captain Hastings, his notebook worn from constant use, stood near the bookshelf, his mind racing with the clues Poirot had uncovered. The cyanide vial, the used sugar bowl, the missing cable, and the two perfect alibis. The investigation was reaching a critical juncture, and the tension in the manor was palpable, like a storm about to break. The guests, confined to the manor by Inspector Grayson's orders, had grown increasingly fractious, their polite facades crumbling under the weight of suspicion. Breakfast had been a silent affair, punctuated by sharp glances and curt exchanges. Lady Evelyn Ashford, her sapphire pendant a constant presence, had barely touched her food, her eyes distant. Dr. Lionel Crane's hands trembled as he sipped his tea, while Clara Crane hovered protectively, her usual chatter replaced by a strained silence. Victor Langston's scowl deepened with each passing hour, his patience worn thin by the confinement. Miss Beatrice Lyle, ever observant, scribbled in her notebook, her expression unreadable. Harold Gibbs, the beleaguered secretary, seemed to shrink further into himself, his eyes darting nervously, as if expecting arrest at any moment. Poirot, sensing the mounting pressure, had requested the guests gather in the drawing room after breakfast for what he called a conversation. Inspector Grayson, still fixated on Gibbs as the prime suspect, had reluctantly agreed, grumbling about Poirot's theatrical methods. Hastings, however, knew his friend's approach was anything but theatrical. Every word, every pause, was calculated to provoke a reaction, to expose the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. As the guests assembled, Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "We are at a crossroads. A man is dead, poisoned by cyanide in his coffee. The method, it is clear, but the motive, it remains in shadow. I have observed Sir Reginald. He took his coffee black, yet the sugar was used. By whom? And the vial of cyanide, hidden behind the books, why was it left there? A mistake or a deliberate act to mislead? Dr. Crane cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I know nothing of any vial. My work with poisons is academic, not criminal. Clara Crane clutched her husband's arm, her voice rising. He's telling the truth. Why do you keep hounding him? It's that secretary, Gibbs, who was skulking about. Gibbs, his face pale, stammered, I didn't do it. I was loyal to Sir Reginald. I swear, I never touched the coffee.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough, mes amis. The accusations, they fly like arrows, but they miss the mark. Let us speak of motives. Monsieur Langston, your business with Sir Reginald, was it only about coffee exports, or was there more? A debt, perhaps? Or a betrayal? Langston's jaw tightened, his voice low. I told you, it was business. He backed out of a deal. I was angry, but I didn't kill him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you, Madame Ashford, your husband, he was a man of secrets, non? Did he share them with you, or did you discover them alone? Lady Evelyn's composure cracked, her voice trembling. What are you implying, Mr. Poirot? Reginald was my husband. I loved him. Her hand clutched her pendant, and Hastings saw tears well in her eyes, though they did not fall. Poirot turned to Miss Lyle, who met his gaze with a cool detachment. Mademoiselle, your notebook. It records more than a novel, I think. You see the secrets of others, but do you hide your own? Beatrice's lips curved slightly. I'm a writer, Mr. Poirot. I observe. If I have secrets, they're no more sinister than anyone else's here. The room was taut with tension, and Hastings felt the atmosphere shift, as though a dam were about to burst. Poirot's next words were soft, almost a whisper. Mes amis, one of you knows the truth. The poison was not in the pot, but in the cup. A moment's distraction, a clever hand. I ask you now, who was it that distracted Sir Reginald as he poured the coffee? Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Then, to everyone's surprise, Clara Crane's voice broke, high and anguished. It was me, she cried, her hands covering her face. I dropped my glass of wine. It was an accident, I swear. I didn't mean to distract him. Dr. Crane reached for her, his face ashen. Clara, what are you saying? She sobbed, her words tumbling out. It was just before I left the library, at 10:20. I was nervous, and my glass slipped. It shattered on the floor, and everyone turned to look. Sir Reginald was pouring the coffee, and he stopped to scold me. I didn't think.
Coffee tray, when the glass broke. Clara's eyes darted around the room, her voice trembling. I don't know. Everyone was looking at me. I think Mr. Gibbs was closest, and Miss Lyle was nearby writing. Lady Evelyn was by the door, and Mr. Langston had already left. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci, Madame Crane. Your honesty, it brings us closer to the truth. He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. A spilled glass. A moment of chaos. The perfect opportunity for a clever hand to slip cyanide into Sir Reginald's cup. Who among you seized it? The accusation hung in the air, and Hastings saw the guests' faces shift. Langston's scowl, Gibbs's panic, Beatrice's faint smile, Lady Evelyn's clenched jaw. Dr. Crane, however, looked stricken, his hands gripping his wife's. Clara didn't know, he whispered. She couldn't have known. Poirot's voice softened. Perhaps not, Doctor. But someone did, and they used this moment to kill. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We shall reconvene tomorrow. For now, rest. But know that Hercule Poirot is watching. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and dread, Hastings followed Poirot to the library. Clara's confession, he said. It's a breakthrough, isn't it? That moment of distraction, it's when the poison was added. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Oui, Hastings. But it is not the whole story. Madame Crane, she speaks from guilt, but not from knowledge. The killer, they used her accident, but they planned it long before. We must look to the motives, love, greed, revenge. One of these people is breaking, and the truth is near. The manor's halls were silent as the guests retired, but Hastings felt the weight of Clara's confession, a crack in the facade that Poirot would exploit. The killer was among them, their secret teetering on the edge of exposure, and Poirot's relentless pursuit was drawing ever closer, to the heart of the mystery.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The second day at Blackthorn Manor unfolded under a sky heavy with clouds, the mist curling around the estate like a shroud, amplifying the sense of entrapment that gripped its inhabitants. The library, though no longer the physical scene of Sir Reginald Ashford's death, remained the epicenter of the mystery, its shelves and coffee-stained rug a constant reminder of the crime. Hercule Poirot, his immaculate suit a beacon of order in the chaos, stood before the silver coffee tray, his green eyes gleaming with purpose. Captain Hastings, his notebook now a patchwork of observations, stood by the window, watching the guests' strained faces as they gathered in the drawing room at Poirot's request. Clara Crane's emotional confession the previous evening had cracked the veneer of their alibis, and Poirot, ever the strategist, was ready to tighten the net. The guests, under Inspector Grayson's watchful eye, were visibly frayed. Lady Evelyn Ashford sat rigidly, her sapphire pendant catching the dim light, her expression a mask of controlled grief. Dr. Lionel Crane, his spectacles perpetually slipping, clutched his wife's hand, while Clara's eyes, red from crying, darted nervously. Victor Langston paced by the fireplace, his broad frame radiating impatience, his scowl deeper than ever. Miss Beatrice Lyle, her notebook open, scribbled with a detached calm, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of anticipation. Harold Gibbs, the secretary, hovered near the door, his hands twisting, his face pale with dread. The air was thick with suspicion, each guest acutely aware that Poirot's next move could expose their secrets. Poirot had announced a reconstruction of the fatal evening, a theatrical tactic that Hastings knew was designed to provoke. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding as he stood before the group. "We have learned much, but not all. The cyanide, it was in Sir Reginald's cup, introduced during a moment of distraction, Madame Crane's spilled glass of wine at 10:20. This moment, it was the opportunity the killer seized. Today we shall recreate the scene, and the truth it will emerge." Inspector Grayson, standing by the door, frowned. "A reconstruction, Mr. Poirot. We've got Gibbs's fingerprints on the coffee tray, and he was the last with Sir Reginald. Why complicate things?" Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, fingerprints they tell only part of the story. The heart of this crime lies in the minds of those present. Let us begin." He gestured to the library where the coffee tray had been restored to its original state, complete with a fresh pot and 6 porcelain cups, borrowed from the manor's collection to mimic the scene. The guests, reluctant but compelled by Poirot's authority, followed him to the library. Poirot positioned them as they had been at 10 o'clock on the night of the murder, Sir Reginald's place at the head of the table, marked by an empty chair. Lady Evelyn near the door. Dr. Crane and Clara nearby, discussing chemistry. Miss Lyle at the writing desk. Langston, who had left for the billiard room, instructed to stand just outside, and Gibbs, hovering by the bookshelf. Hastings, acting as observer, noted the tension in their postures, as if each feared the reenactment would betray them. Poirot took a silver jug filled with water to represent the coffee. "Sir Reginald pours," he said, miming the action, filling each cup with precision. 6 cups, 1 for each. "Then, Madame Crane, your glass falls." He nodded to Clara, who, trembling, knocked over an empty wineglass provided for the purpose. It shattered on the floor, the sound sharp in the silent room. The guests turned instinctively, their eyes on the broken glass. "Now," Poirot said, his voice low, "the distraction. Who was near the tray? Who could have acted?" He moved swiftly, his hand brushing the sugar bowl, then pausing over Sir Reginald's cup. A moment, a flick of the wrist, and the cyanide is added. Who was it? The room was silent, the guests frozen. Gibbs's voice broke first, high and panicked. "It wasn't me."
I was by the bookshelf, fetching a ledger for Sir Reginald. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A ledger, Monsieur Gibbs. Yet you mentioned a cable before. Which is it? Gibbs paled, stammering, but Poirot turned to Miss Lyle. Mademoiselle, you were writing, oui? But your eyes, they see everything. Did you see Monsieur Gibbs move? Beatrice's pen paused, her gaze steady. I saw him by the bookshelf, as he says. But I was focused on my notes. I can't be certain. Poirot nodded, then turned to Lady Evelyn. Madame, you were by the door, preparing to retire. Did you see anyone approach the tray? Lady Evelyn's fingers tightened on her pendant, her voice cold. I was distracted by Clara's clumsiness. I didn't notice the tray. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Crane, who flinched. Doctor, you were near the table, discussing alkaloids. A convenient topic, no? Did you see the sugar bowl touched? Crane's hands shook. No, I was talking to Sir Reginald. I didn't see anything. Clara clutched his arm, her voice trembling. He's telling the truth, Mr. Poirot. We were both distracted by my accident. Poirot stepped back, his eyes scanning the group. A distraction, oui, but planned. The killer knew the glass would fall, or they created the moment. Let us try again.
Her eyes widened, her hand dropping from her pendant. I told you I didn't drink the coffee. I don't take sugar. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Yet the bowl, it is not full. A small detail, but it speaks. He turned to the group, his voice rising. Mes amis, the killer is among you, and they feel the pressure. The vial, the sugar, the broken glass, these are not accidents. Speak now, or the truth will be forced from you. The room erupted in chaos, Gibbs's protests, Clara's sobs, Langston's curses. But it was Lady Evelyn who broke, her voice a raw whisper. Enough, she cried, her hands trembling. I can't bear this. Reginald, he wasn't what you think. He had enemies, yes, but I didn't kill him. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was relentless. Enemies, madame? Name them. She hesitated, her gaze flickering to Langston, then Gibbs. Victor, he argued with Reginald over money. And Gibbs, he knew too much about Reginald's affairs. But I swear I didn't touch the coffee. Poirot nodded, dismissing the group. We are close, mes amis. The truth, it is near. Reflect tonight, for tomorrow we shall know all. As the guests dispersed, Hastings pulled Poirot aside. Lady Evelyn's outburst. It's another crack, isn't it? She's hiding something. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Oui, Hastings, the trap, it has sprung. Her words, they point to others, but they also betray her fear. The killer, they are desperate now, and they will act. We must be ready. The manor grew silent as night fell, but Hastings felt the tension mounting. The reconstruction had shaken the guests, and Lady Evelyn's partial confession had opened a door. Poirot's trap was closing, and the killer, cornered, would soon make their move. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning at Blackthorn Manor broke with a brittle clarity, the mist lifting to reveal a sky of cold, unyielding blue. The library, its shelves heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, stood as the stage for Hercule Poirot's final act. The detective, his mustache waxed to perfection, stood before the silver coffee tray, its 5 untouched cups gleaming like silent witnesses. Captain Hastings,
His notebook, now a chronicle of the case's twists, stood by the fireplace, his heart pounding with anticipation. The guests, summoned to the drawing room, were a tableau of frayed nerves and guarded expressions, each aware that Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth was about to culminate. The previous day's reconstruction, Beatrice Lyle and Gibbs sat in a tense semicircle, their eyes fixed on Poirot, who commanded the room with the quiet authority of a conductor before a symphony. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, red herrings and half-truths. Sir Reginald Ashford was poisoned by cyanide in his coffee, a crime of precision and cunning. Today, Hercule Poirot will reveal the truth, step by step, using the little grey cells to uncover the killer among you." The room was silent, the air thick with dread. Lady Evelyn's fingers brushed her sapphire pendant. Dr. Crane's spectacles slipped down his nose, and Gibbs's hands twisted in his lap. Poirot continued, pacing slowly before the fireplace. "Let us begin with the facts. The cyanide was in Sir Reginald's cup, not the pot, introduced during a moment of distraction. Madame Crane's spilled wineglass at 10:20. This moment, it was the key. But it was not an accident. The killer planned it, using the chaos to act." He turned to Clara Crane, whose eyes widened. "Madam, your confession was brave, but it was not the whole truth. The glass, it fell, oui, but someone ensured it would. Someone who knew your nervousness, your tendency to clumsiness under pressure." Clara gasped, clutching her husband's arm. "I didn't mean to help anyone. It was an accident." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, madam. You were a pawn, not the player. Let us consider the sugar bowl. Sir Reginald took his coffee black, yet the sugar was used. Why? Because the killer needed a pretext, a moment to approach the tray without suspicion." He turned to the map of the manor spread on the table. "The movements of that night, they are crucial. Monsieur Langston, you were in the billiard room, but the door is mere steps from the library. Dr. Crane, you were discussing alkaloids, a convenient topic. Mademoiselle Lyle, your notebook records every glance, yet you claim to have seen nothing. Monsieur Gibbs, your cable to Brazil, it was never written. And Madame Ashford, your headache, it kept you from the coffee, but not from the library." Lady Evelyn's voice was sharp. "What are you implying, Mr. Poirot?" "I loved my husband." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Love, madam, can be a motive as powerful as hate. Let us reconstruct the evening once more, but with the truth." He moved to the coffee tray, miming the pouring of the coffee. Sir Reginald pours 6 cups. Madame Crane's glass falls. All eyes turn. In that moment, the killer acts, slipping cyanide into Sir Reginald's cup. But how deal? Did it drive you to revenge? Dr. Crane, your knowledge of poisons, did Sir Reginald threaten to expose a secret? Mademoiselle Lyle, your observations, did they uncover something dangerous? Monsieur Gibbs, your loyalty, did it mask a deeper resentment? The guests shifted, their faces a mix of fear and defiance. Poirot's voice softened, but his words cut like a blade. "And Madame Ashford, your pendant, it is not just a jewel, is it? It is a gift, oui, but from whom? Not Sir Reginald, I think." Lady Evelyn's hand froze, her face paling. "How dare you?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "The truth, it is near. Let me tell you what happened. The killer, they planned this for weeks, perhaps months. They knew Sir Reginald's love for his coffee, his habit of pouring it himself. They obtained cyanide, easily done, for one with access to a chemist's supplies. They waited for the perfect moment, and Madam Crane's clumsiness provided it. He turned to Dr. Crane, whose hands trembled. "Doctor, your nervousness, it betrays you. You spoke of alkaloids with Sir Reginald, but you also spoke of debts. He held a loan over you, did he not? A loan you could not repay." Crane's voice was a whisper. "Yes, but I didn't kill him. I couldn't." Poirot nodded, then turned to Lady Evelyn. "And you, madame? Your pendant. It was a gift from Victor Langston, was it not? An affair, hidden from your husband but discovered. Sir Reginald threatened to expose you, to ruin you both." Langston surged to his feet, his face red. "That's a lie! I never—" "Silence!" Poirot's voice was a whip crack. "The truth, it is not in your denials, but in your actions. The vial, it was yours, Dr. Crane, hidden to deflect suspicion. But the hand that placed the cyanide was not yours. It was Madame Ashford's." Lady Evelyn gasped, her hand dropping from her pendant. "No, you can't prove that." Poirot's smile was cold. "Oh, but I can. The sugar bowl, it was your pretext. You approached the tray, pretending to take sugar, but instead you slipped the cyanide into your husband's cup, using the distraction of the spilled glass. You knew his habits, his pride in his coffee. You knew he would drink alone." He turned to the group, his voice rising. "The motive? Betrayal. Sir Reginald discovered your affair with Monsieur Langston. He threatened divorce, scandal, ruin. You acted to protect your future, your status. The vial you took from Dr. Crane's bag, knowing his debts made him vulnerable. You framed Gibbs, the loyal secretary, with his proximity to the scene." Lady Evelyn's composure shattered, her voice a sob. "I had no choice. He was going to destroy me."
"Must face the consequences." The room erupted. Clara's sobs, Crane's protests, Gibbs's relief. Grayson, stunned, handcuffed Lady Evelyn, who stood trembling, her pendant glinting like a final accusation. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, the truth. It is always in the details. The pendant, the sugar, the moment of distraction. The little gray cells, they do not fail." As Lady Evelyn was led away, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare. Poirot's trap had closed, and the truth, bitter as the coffee, had been revealed. The reflection. The sun hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its rays piercing the lingering mist and casting a golden glow across the Devonshire countryside. The manor, once a bastion of secrets, now stood in a state of quiet aftermath, its halls echoing with the weight of the truth unveiled. The library, where Sir Reginald Ashford had met his end, was silent. The silver coffee tray removed, the stain on the rug a fading testament to the crime. Hercule Poirot, his immaculate figure framed by the window, gazed out at the rolling hills, his green eyes distant yet serene. Captain Hastings, seated in an armchair with his notebook closed, felt the tension of the past days dissolve, replaced by a somber reflection on the human frailties that Poirot had so deftly exposed. Lady Evelyn Ashford had been taken into custody by Inspector Grayson, her confession, wrung from her by Poirot's relentless pressure, still ringing in Hastings's ears. The other guests, released from the suspicion that had bound them, had begun to disperse. Victor Langston, his affair with Lady Evelyn exposed, had left for London in a fury, his broad shoulders hunched with shame. Dr. Lionel Crane and his wife Clara, shaken by their proximity to the crime, had retired to their room,
their voices hushed with relief. Miss Beatrice Lyle, her notebook now a chronicle of real rather than fictional drama, had lingered to thank Poirot, her eyes gleaming with a writer's fascination. Harold Gibbs, vindicated but shaken, had resumed his duties, sorting Sir Reginald's papers with a trembling hand. Poirot turned from the window, his mustache twitching slightly as he met Hastings's gaze. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case, it is closed, but the heart, it lingers. The truth, it is a bitter brew, like the coffee that brought Sir Reginald's end." Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the dramatic reveal. "You were brilliant, Poirot. The way you pieced it together, the sugar bowl, the vial."
But signs of a plan, a woman's cunning. Lady Evelyn's composure, it was too perfect, her grief too controlled, and her outburst, it betrayed her fear of exposure. Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "But the vial, how did you know she took it from Dr. Crane?" Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Dr. Crane. He was nervous, oui, but not guilty. His knowledge of poisons made him vulnerable, a perfect scapegoat. The vial, hidden behind the books, was meant to point to him, but it was too convenient, too deliberate. Lady Evelyn, she had access to his bag during a visit to his laboratory weeks before. She admitted as much in her confession. She used his debt to Sir Reginald to ensure his silence, believing he would fear accusation. And Gibbs? Hastings asked. He was so nervous I was sure he was involved. Poirot chuckled softly. Monsieur Gibbs, he is a man of loyalty, but also of fear. His nervousness was that of a servant who knows too much. Sir Reginald's secrets, his arguments with Langston, his suspicions of his wife's infidelity. Gibbs's missing cable was a lie, yes, but to protect his employer's reputation, not to cover a crime. He was a red herring, as the inspector believed, but not the killer. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You saw through it all, the lies, the distractions. But why did Lady Evelyn do it? She had wealth, status. Why risk it all? Poirot's expression grew somber. The heart, Hastings. It is a dangerous thing. Lady Evelyn loved Monsieur Langston, but more than that, she feared ruin. Sir Reginald, he was not the kind diplomat he seemed. He was controlling, as she said, and his discovery of her affair was a threat to her world. Divorce, scandal, the loss of her position, it was too much. She chose murder to preserve her future, a choice as old as human passion. Hastings sighed, his gaze drifting to the library shelves. It's tragic, really. All this beauty, this elegance, and yet such darkness beneath. Oui, Poirot said, his voice tinged with melancholy. It is the human condition, mon ami. We build our manners, our lives with care. But the flaws, they are always there, waiting to be exposed. Hercule Poirot, he does not judge, only observes. The truth, it is my duty to find, no matter how bitter. The two men fell silent, the weight of the case settling between them. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn. The manor, freed from its secrets, seemed to breathe easier, though its elegance was forever tarnished by the stain of murder. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused by the library door, his hand resting on the frame. Hastings, you will write of this, oui? But do not make it too romantic. The truth, it is enough. Hastings smiled, tucking his note. For Poirot, it is order, method, and the little grey cells. He adjusted his hat, his movements precise, and stepped into the hall. Come, mon ami, London awaits, and perhaps a cup of tisane to cleanse the palate of this bitter coffee. They walked to the waiting motor car, the gravel crunching underfoot, the manor receding behind them. Hastings glanced back, the image of the coffee tray lingering in his mind. The case was closed, the killer unmasked, but the echoes of Blackthorn Manor would remain, a testament to the fragility of human hearts.
and the brilliance of Hercule Poirot. As the car pulled away, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed. "The next case, Hastings," he murmured. "It will be different. But the truth, it is always the same. We seek it. We find it. And we move on." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the quiet heroism of his friend. The world would continue, with its secrets and its crimes. But as long as Poirot's little grey cells were at work, no truth would remain hidden for long. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor, casting a soft golden haze over the drawing room, where the remaining guests had gathered one final time. The air, though lighter now that Lady Evelyn Ashford's guilt had been exposed, still carried a faint undercurrent of unease, as if the manor itself were reluctant to shed the weight of its secrets. Hercule Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes surveying the room with a quiet intensity. Captain Hastings, seated in a corner with his notebook closed, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The case was solved, the killer unmasked, but the human cost of the truth lingered like the bitter aftertaste of Sir Reginald's fatal coffee. The guests, no longer suspects, but still bound by the events of the past days, sat in a loose circle, their faces reflecting a spectrum of emotions. Dr. Lionel Crane, his spectacles polished, but his expression weary, held Clara's hand tightly, as though anchoring himself against the storm of revelations. Clara, her auburn curls pinned neatly, looked drained, her earlier vivacity replaced by a subdued gratitude for her husband's exoneration. Victor Langston, his affair with Lady Evelyn now public, sat apart, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. Miss Beatrice Lyle, her notebook open but her pen still, observed the group with a writer's curiosity, though her usual detachment seemed tempered by a newfound respect for Poirot's genius. Harold Gibbs, vindicated but shaken, fidgeted with a stack of papers, his role as Sir Reginald's secretary now uncertain. Inspector Grayson, his in-Inspector Grayson, his initial skepticism of Poirot replaced by Evelyn's confessed, and the evidence is airtight. The vial, the sugar bowl, her motive, it all fits. "I'll admit I was wrong about Gibbs." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Merci, Monsieur l'Inspecteur. But the truth, it is not about being right or wrong. It is about order, method, and the little grey cells. The evidence, it was there, waiting to be seen." Hastings, unable to resist, leaned forward. "Poirot, you mentioned the pendant early on. How did you know it was a gift from Langston, not Sir Reginald?" Poirot's eyes twinkled as he turned to his friend. "Mon ami, it was a matter of observation. The pendant, it was extravagant, a sapphire of rare quality. Yet Sir Reginald, he was a man of restraint, of classic tastes. Such a gift did not suit his character. But Monsieur Langston, a man of wealth and ambition, he would choose such a token to win a lady's heart. Lady Evelyn's constant touch of it, her nervousness, it betrayed her secret." Langston's head snapped up, his voice low. "I never meant for this to happen. I loved her, but I didn't know she'd go so far." Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. "Love, Monsieur Langston, it can blind, but it does not excuse. You did not wield the poison, but your actions, they set the stage. Lady Evelyn, she chose murder to protect her future, but it was a future built on deceit." Clara Crane's voice trembled as she spoke. "I still can't believe it. I broke that glass, and it gave her the chance. If I hadn't been so clumsy—" Poirot raised a hand, his voice gentle. "No, Madame Crane, you were not the cause. The killer, she used your moment, but she planned long before. Your honesty, it helped us find the truth." Dr. Crane cleared his throat, his hands steady for the first time. "And the vial. I should have noticed it was missing from my bag. I was careless, but I swear I never suspected her." Poirot nodded. Your carelessness, Doctor. It was exploited. But you are not to blame. The killer, she chose her tools with care. Your vial, Madame Crane's accident, Monsieur Gibbs's proximity, all to weave a web of misdirection. Miss Lyle closed her notebook, her voice measured. You saw through it all, Mr. Poirot. I've written many mysteries, but yours, it's a masterpiece. The way you used the reconstruction to break her, it was brilliant. Poirot's smile was modest. Mademoiselle, a mystery is only as good as its truth. The reconstruction, it was a mirror, reflecting their fears. Lady Evelyn, she could not withstand the reflection. Gibbs, his voice hesitant, spoke up. Mr. Poirot, I lied about the cable. Sir Reginald asked me to keep quiet about his suspicions of Evelyn's affair. I thought I was protecting him. Poirot's gaze was kind.
But see the truth. You are free of guilt.
The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them. Hastings, watching his friend, marveled at his ability to balance compassion with justice. The detective had not only solved the crime, but had laid bare the human frailties that fueled it. Love, fear, ambition, betrayal. As the guests began to disperse, preparing to leave the manor that had become a crucible of truth, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he said softly, "this case, it reminds us that the heart, it is both fragile and fierce. Lady Evelyn, she killed for love, but it was a love twisted by fear. We must pity her, even as we condemn her." Hastings nodded, his thoughts heavy. "It's a sad business, Poirot. All this elegance, this beauty, and yet so much pain beneath it." "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "It is the paradox of humanity. We seek beauty, order, but we carry chaos within. Hercule Poirot, he brings order to the chaos, but the heart, it remains untamed." They stepped into the hall, where the manor's staff bustled, preparing for the guests' departure. The air was lighter now, the secrets aired, but Hastings felt a lingering sadness. Blackthorn Manor, with its ivy-clad walls and polished interiors, would never be the same, its elegance forever marked by the stain of murder. As they approached the waiting motorcar, Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the estate one last time. "Hastings, you will return to London, oui? And perhaps write of this, but with care. The truth, it is enough without embellishment." Hastings smiled, patting his notebook. "I'll try, Poirot. But you make it hard to avoid a touch of drama." Poirot chuckled, adjusting his hat. "Drama, it is for others. For Poirot, it is the truth, always the truth. Come, mon ami, let us leave this place to its ghosts." The car pulled away, the manor receding into the mist, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's unrelenting logic. Hastings glanced at his friend, whose eyes were already bright with the anticipation of the next challenge. The world, with its endless mysteries, awaited, and Hercule Poirot would be ready, his little grey cells ever vigilant. 13. The Unseen Threads. The evening shadows stretched long across Blackthorn Manor, their fingers
In his lap, its pages a testament to Poirot's brilliance, and the human frailties laid bare. The guests, though no longer bound by suspicion, remained in the manor for one final night,
their departures delayed by the formalities of Inspector Grayson's investigation. Dr. Lionel Crane and his wife Clara sat close, their hands entwined, their faces marked by relief, but shadowed by the ordeal. Victor Langston, his affair with Lady Evelyn exposed, stood by the window, his broad frame rigid with suppressed emotion. Miss Beatrice Lyle, her notebook tucked away, sipped tea with an air of quiet contemplation, her writer's mind undoubtedly weaving the events into a future tale. Harold Gibbs, his loyalty to Sir Reginald vindicated, moved about the room with a nervous energy, arranging papers as if to restore order to a world upended. Inspector Grayson, his initial skepticism of Poirot now replaced by respect, had left for Exeter to file his report, leaving the manor in the care of Sergeant Brooks. The sergeant, stationed by the door, watched the group with a dutiful but weary eye. Poirot, however, seemed far from finished, his gaze darting from guest to guest, as if searching for an overlooked detail. Hastings, catching his friend's expression, leaned forward. "Poirot, the case is solved, isn't it?" Lady Evelyn confessed. "The cyanide, the pendant, the sugar bowl, it all fits. Yet you seem restless." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon ami, you are observant, but you see only the surface. The case, it is closed, oui, but there are threads, small, unseen threads, that linger. Hercule Poirot, he does not rest until all is clear." He turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. "Mes amis, before we part, there is one matter more. The truth, it has been found, but the why, it is not fully understood. Let us speak of the shadows behind the crime." The guests stirred, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Dr. Crane adjusted his spectacles, his voice tentative. "What more is there, Mr. Poirot?" Lady Evelyn admitted everything, her affair, the poison, her fear of scandal. Poirot nodded, pacing slowly before the fireplace. "Oui, doctor," she confessed. "But the heart, it is complex. Lady Evelyn, she killed to protect her future. But was she alone in her motives, or was there another pulling the strings, guiding her hand?" Clara Crane gasped, her hand tightening on her husband's. "You mean someone else was involved? But who?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Let us consider the unseen. Monsieur Langston, your affair with Madame Ashford, it was passionate, oui, but also calculated. Did you encourage her fear of Sir Reginald's wrath? Did you perhaps suggest a way to secure piercing?"
Calm, monsieur. I do not accuse you of murder, but of influence. Your ambition, it is well known. A scandal would ruin you as much as her. Perhaps you whispered possibilities, knowing her desperation. Langston's fists clenched, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. Poirot turned to Miss Lyle, who met his gaze with a faint smile. "Mademoiselle, your notebook, it records more than you admit. You saw the affair, did you not? Your notes, they hint at glances, meetings, secrets. Did you know of Lady Evelyn's plan?" Beatrice's smile faltered, her voice cool. "I'm a writer, Mr. Poirot. I observe, I record. If I saw their affair, it was only as inspiration for my work. I had no part in her crime." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet, your silence, it protected her until the end. A writer's prerogative. A writer's prerogative, perhaps, but a dangerous one." He turned to Gibbs, who flinched under his gaze. "Monsieur Gibbs, you knew of Sir Reginald's suspicions. Did you also know of Lady Evelyn's intentions? Did your loyalty blind you to her actions?" Gibbs's hands twisted, his voice trembling. "I swear, Mr. Poirot, I only knew he suspected her. I thought he was wrong. I never imagined she'd go so far."
Poirot's gaze softened, but his words were firm. Loyalty, it can be a veil, Monsieur Gibbs. You saw, but you did not act, and in that you share a small part of the tragedy. The room was silent, the guests' faces reflecting a mix of guilt and relief. Hastings, watching, felt a chill. Poirot was not accusing them of murder, but of complicity in the web of motives that led to it. He leaned closer. Poirot, are you saying they all played a part? Poirot's voice was low, meant only for Hastings. Not in the act, mon ami, but in the silence. Each knew something. Langston's ambition, Lyle's observations, Gibbs's loyalty, Crane's vulnerability. They did not kill, but their secrets fed the fire. Lady Evelyn, she was the hand, but the heart of this crime, it was shared. He turned back to the group, his voice rising. Mes amis, the truth, it is not only in the act of murder, but in the silence that surrounds it. You each carried a piece of this tragedy, and in your silence, you allowed it to grow. Hercule Poirot, he sees not only the crime, but the shadows behind it. Clara Crane's voice broke, her eyes wet. We didn't know. We couldn't have stopped her. Poirot's expression was kind but resolute. Perhaps not, madame.
Not only the crime, but the humanity behind it. Now, let us prepare to leave. This manor, it has had enough of us. They stepped outside, the evening air crisp and clean. The manor loomed behind them, its elegance marred but enduring. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose eyes were bright with the satisfaction of a case resolved, yet tempered by the weight of its truths. The unseen threads had been laid bare, and Blackthorn Manor would carry their echoes long after Poirot and Hastings had gone. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The twilight at Blackthorn Manor draped the estate in a soft, melancholic glow, the last rays of sunlight filtering through the ancient oaks that lined the drive. The manor, its secrets laid bare by Hercule Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth, stood as a silent monument to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The drawing room, where the guests had gathered for their final moments under Poirot's scrutiny, was now empty, save for the detective and Captain Hastings. Poirot stood by the grand window, his small frame silhouetted against the fading light, his green eyes distant as he contemplated the case's aftermath. Hastings, seated with his notebook tucked away, felt a quiet awe at his friend's ability to unravel not only the crime, but the intricate human motives that wove it together. The guests, their roles in the tragedy clarified, were preparing to depart. Dr. Lionel Crane and Clara had packed their bags, their faces etched with relief but also a lingering guilt for their unwitting part in the drama. Victor Langston, his reputation tarnished by his affair with Lady Evelyn, had left abruptly, his motor car roaring down the drive as if to outrun his shame. Miss Beatrice Lyle lingered in the library, her notebook now a private record of the case, her writer's curiosity sated, but her demeanor subdued. Harold Gibbs, his loyalty to Sir Reginald both his burden and his salvation, busied himself with the manor's affairs, his hands steadier now that suspicion no longer shadowed him. Inspector Grayson had returned to Exeter, his report complete, leaving Sergeant Brooks to oversee the manor's transition back to normalcy. Poirot turned from the window, his mustache twitching slightly as he met Hastings's gaze. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case, it is finished, yet the echoes remain. The truth, it is like the coffee, bitter, but necessary. We have unmasked the killer, but we have also seen the fragility of those who surrounded her." Hastings nodded, his thoughts heavy with the case's complexities. "Lady Evelyn's confession tied it all together, Poirot, but your talk of the unseen threads yesterday, it made me realize how much more there was to this. The others, they weren't guilty, but they weren't innocent either." "Précisément," Poirot said, pacing slowly across the room. "The crime,
It is not only the act of murder, but the silence that permits
Each guest, Monsieur Langston, Mademoiselle Lyle, Monsieur Gibbs, the Cranes, they held a piece of the puzzle, a secret they kept for their own reasons. Love, fear, ambition, loyalty. These are the threads that wove the tragedy. Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. You said Langston might have influenced Lady Evelyn. Do you think he knew she'd kill Sir Reginald? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not knew, Hastings, but suspected, perhaps. Monsieur Langston, he is a man of calculation. His affair with Madame Ashford was not only passion, but a gamble for power. He knew Sir Reginald's discovery of their liaison threatened his ambitions. Did he whisper suggestions? Perhaps not directly, but his words, they planted seeds. Lady Evelyn, she acted alone, but his shadow was there. Hastings frowned, recalling Beatrice Lyle's notebook. And Miss Lyle, she saw it all, didn't she? Her notes. They weren't just for a novel. Poirot's smile was faint. Mademoiselle Lyle, she is a collector of truths, disguised as a writer of fiction. Her notes, they recorded the glances, the whispers, the moments of tension. She knew of the affair, perhaps even suspected Lady Evelyn's desperation, but she chose silence, for to speak would disrupt her story. A dangerous choice, but not a criminal one. And Gibbs? Hastings asked. His lie about the cable, it threw us off for so long. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Monsieur Gibbs, his loyalty was his prison. He knew Sir Reginald suspected his wife, but he believed it his duty to protect his employer's honor. His lie, it was not to conceal murder, but to shield a man he admired. In this, he was a victim of his own devotion. Hastings sighed, his gaze drifting to the fireplace, where embers glowed faintly. It's a tangled web, Poirot. Lady Evelyn was the killer, but they all played a part, even if they didn't know it. Oui, Poirot said, his voice tinged with melancholy. The human heart. It is a labyrinth. Hercule Poirot, he navigates it with method, but he does not judge. We uncover the truth, Hastings, but we cannot undo the pain it reveals. The sound of footsteps interrupted them, and Miss Lyle appeared at the door, her coat draped over her arm. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice steady but warm. I'm leaving now. I wanted to thank you. This case, it's given me a story I'll never forget, though I'll never publish it. This place. It will carry the memory of this crime, but it will endure. The human spirit, it is resilient, even in its flaws. Hastings followed, his heart lighter but still heavy with the case's lessons. You always find a way to see the good in it, Poirot, even after something so dark. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Not good, Hastings, but truth. It is enough. He turned, his coat swirling slightly, and led the way to the hall where their bags awaited. The manor's staff, led by Mrs. Hargreaves, bid them farewell with quiet gratitude, their faces reflecting the relief of closure. As they stepped into the waiting motor car, the manor receded behind them, its ivy-clad walls a fading silhouette against the twilight. Hastings glanced at Poirot, who sat with his eyes half closed, a faint smile on his lips. Another case solved, Hastings said. But I'll never get used to how you do it. Poirot chuckled softly. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what others miss. And now, a tisane perhaps, to wash away the taste of this bitter coffee.
The car rolled down the drive, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its quiet recovery. The case was closed, its final threads woven into the tapestry of truth, but Hastings knew that wherever Poirot went, another mystery would soon beckon, and the little gray cells would be ready. Chapter 15. The Departure. The final morning at Blackthorn Manor broke with a crisp clarity. The Devonshire sky a vast expanse of pale blue, unmarred by the mists that had cloaked the estate during the days of investigation. The manor itself, its Georgian elegance softened by the morning light, stood as a silent witness to the tragedy and truth that had unfolded within its walls. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable in a tailored overcoat, stood on the gravel drive, his valise at his side, his green eyes scanning the horizon with a quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, his own bag packed, joined him, his notebook now a completed chronicle of the Black Coffee mystery, its pages heavy with the weight of human folly and Poirot's genius. The guests had departed in the early hours, each carrying the scars of the case. Dr. Lionel Crane and Clara, their marriage strengthened by their shared ordeal, had left for London with promises to rebuild their lives away from the shadow of Sir Reginald's death. Victor Langston, his ambitions tarnished by scandal, had vanished into the city, his future uncertain. Miss Beatrice Lyle, her writer's curiosity sated, had taken a train to Cornwall, her notebook brimming with notes for a novel she vowed would remain unwritten. Harold Gibbs, the loyal secretary, had stayed behind to settle Sir Reginald's affairs, his devotion to his late employer undimmed by the revelation.
Adjusted his hat, his movements precise as always, and turned to Hastings. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant. "The case, it is complete. The truth, it has been found, and Blackthorn Manor it will heal in time. But for Hercule Poirot, there is always another mystery, another truth to uncover." Hastings smiled, patting his notebook. "You've done it again, Poirot. Lady Evelyn, the cyanide, the pendant, it was all so intricate, yet you saw through it. I'll never understand how you do it." Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes twinkling. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They see the patterns where others see only chaos. The pendant, it was a symbol of betrayal. The sugar bowl, a tool of deception. The spilled glass, a moment seized. Each detail, it told a story. And Poirot, he listens." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to the manor's library, where the coffee stain on the rug had marked the beginning of their journey. "It's a sad story, though. Lady Evelyn, she had everything, yet she threw it away for fear of losing it. We," Poirot said, his expression softening. "The heart, it is a fragile thing, mon ami. Lady Evelyn, she loved, but her love was poisoned by fear, by the need to control her fate. She chose murder, and in doing so, she lost all she sought to protect. It is a lesson, Hastings, in the danger of secrets." They walked toward the waiting motor car, the gravel crunching underfoot, the manor looming behind them. Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, stood at the door, her stout figure a pillar of resilience. She raised a hand in farewell, her eyes grateful. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot," she called. "You've brought peace to this house, even if it's a bitter peace." Poirot inclined his head, his smile gracious. "Madame, peace is always worth the price. Take care of this place. It has seen enough sorrow." As they settled into the car, Hastings glanced back at the manor.
its ivy-clad walls catching the morning light. "Do you think it'll ever be the same, Poirot? After all this?" Poirot's gaze followed his voice thoughtful. "No, Hastings, it will endure, but it will carry the memory of this tragedy, as all places do. The human spirit, it builds anew, but the scars, they remain. For us, we move forward to new challenges, new truths." The car rolled down the drive, the manor shrinking in the distance, its elegance both haunting and enduring. Hastings leaned back, his mind
Soul, oui? No more coffee for a while. Hastings laughed, the sound breaking the somber mood. Agreed, Poirot. Tea for me too, something to wash away the bitterness. The car sped toward the horizon, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its quiet recovery. The case was closed, its truths laid bare, but Hastings knew that wherever Poirot went, another mystery would soon call. The little grey cells, ever vigilant, would be ready, and Hastings would be there, notebook in hand, to witness their brilliance once more. As the manor faded from view, Poirot's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "The world, Hastings, it is full of shadows, but the truth, it is like the sun. It always rises. Let us go find it again." The road stretched ahead, and with it the promise of new adventures, new secrets, and the unyielding pursuit of truth that defined Hercule Poirot.